Hi everyone, I'm Lauren-Jane. I'm a junior doctor and I recently had the privilege of helping a couple of people with their applications to med school. I found it really rewarding and I just wanted to share some of what I've learned with you to help you bolster your med school applications. So what I wanted to do in this video was just have a talk about work experience and what I did and how I think that could be improved on, knowing what I know. So when I went to med school, there were 3 pieces of work experience that I had. The first was that I volunteered as a Red Cross first aider. The second was that I volunteered in a nursing home. And the third was that I was a befriender on an inpatient ward. And that's just really where you spend time talking to and with patients who are quite lonely and quite bored. So there are a couple of things that I think we need to look at when we think about work experience, and you really need to make your work experience work for you. So we know that medical school is really competitive and it's about more than just having good grades or a good GAMSAT score. You really need to be able to demonstrate a couple of things which I think universities really look for. So the first thing is commitment to the speciality. The second thing is that you understand the job of a doctor. And the third thing is reflection, but we'll come on to that. So the first 2 things kind of really play together. So medical schools really want people who are going to stick the course and who are going to go on and be doctors for the rest of their life. We have a really big problem at the moment with med student retention, with junior doctor retention. So they're looking for people who are really serious about this course, and they want people who have demonstrated that. So if we look at my experience through that lens, it doesn't hold up too well, actually. So if we look at being a first aider with the Red Cross, does it show my commitment to the speciality? Well, yes, in a way. I'm giving up my free time. I'm doing something in the sphere of healthcare. But often one of the things I ask at med school is, why do you want to be a doctor? Why don't you want to be a paramedic? Why don't we want to be a nurse? And in terms of being able to justify why you want to be a doctor, being a first aider doesn't totally help you. It's good, and if you're going to go and do that, or that's something you were considering, definitely go and do it, because you can talk about things like dealing with patients, communication between colleagues. It's useful, definitely useful. But in terms of showing that you understand the job of a doctor, it's not super useful. In terms of the working in nursing home, probably more useful than the Red Cross first aider, because GPs will be going into the nursing home. So you are working more closely with medicine. So if you're going to go and work in a nursing home, and I definitely recommend that because it's quite easy to achieve. They are always looking for people to come in and do those jobs as volunteers. You need to really think about making that shift pay for you, really. So think about, is the GP going to come in that day? Can you do shifts when the GP is due? Think about, usually the GPs are really happy to talk to you if you just say, I'm thinking about doing a medical degree, can we talk about it? They'll be really helpful. Perhaps that GP is going to go and break some bad news to a family. That's really useful for you to sit in on if that's available, because you can observe things like the dynamics between the GP and the family. How did that consultation go? Did it go well? If it did, why did it go well? What can you learn from that? If it didn't go well, why did it not go well? And again, what can you learn from that? And I would really recommend keeping a log, whether you are about to start work experience or whether you've already done work experience. Get yourself a diary and try and write half a page of something for every shift, or 3 things if you're only doing limited days. Think about things that happened that you can talk about in an interview. So how did the GP talk to the other members of staff? Was it good communication? Was it poor communication? If it was poor, what did they do? What could they have done that would have been better? Did patient care suffer as a result of poor communication? Or did good teamwork mean that something was picked up really quickly? If you saw something like that, log it down. That's really useful for you when you come to interview, because they will often ask you a question like, give me an example of when communication went well in your life. And yeah, you can say, oh, when I was at school or when I was at work, this thing happened. But if you should always make everything you say, every breath in an interview count. So if you can say, oh, well, I did this thing on my work experience and I saw the GP do this, or I saw the sister do this, not only do you answer the question well, but you are also directing the examiner back to the fact that you've got good work experience, like a big neon sign, look at me, I'm committed to this specialty, I've spent my time in a nursing home, and you know, I know how the dynamics work between doctors and patients and other staff members. That's really useful. So when you go to that shift, really have in mind that you're trying to pull things from it, like staff communication between teams. Team working is really important in the NHS, and good team working makes a real difference for patient safety. So think about how doctors and nurses and other staff members work together. In terms of the experience as a befriender on the ward, that's probably the best experience that I had, because again, it's a show commitment to the specialty. Yes, again, I'm using my spare time to do this. It's in a hospital, and you know, that's kind of better than being in a community setting. Is it directly alongside doctors? Well, not really. And the best work experience for that kind of thing is if you can get on a scheme where you can shadow a doctor. The only problem with those is that they're not necessarily widely available, and usually they're for people who are at school. If you can't get access to one of those schemes, probably your best bet is to be in a nursing home or as a befriender, some sort of volunteer in the hospital. The hospital probably the better one to do if you could do any, because you will see the doctors more often. You will see the nurses, there'll be more nurses, and you'll see other professionals as well, occupational therapists, physio, people like that, you know, all kinds of different technicians. And they're really important members of the team. And seeing how they interact with patients, seeing how they interact with doctors, again, log it down, think about it, reflect on it. Another great thing to do is to have a chat to the patients. What went well? What do they like? What things do they think make a good doctor? What things do the nurses think make a good doctor? You'll often find that patients will say things like, sometimes people don't introduce themselves and it makes me feel really unsettled. And to sit and reflect on that, we think, you know, we understand that sometimes junior doctors or other staff members are really busy, and that's why they forget to introduce themselves to a patient. But on the other hand, patients, you know, can be really unsettled, and you know, it's not common for them to have blood taken, and it's invasive. Why should they have to put up with someone coming into their bed space who hasn't introduced themselves? It's not good communication, it's not good patient care. And something as simple as just watching how a junior doctor interacts with the patient and picking up that they've not introduced themselves can actually, if you reflect on it, give you something really substantial to talk about at interview. And that's what we're really looking for with work experience. It's more than just being able to put on your CV, oh, I went to the nursing home, I was a befriender. It's being able to talk in the interview about the things that you've learned and reflected on, and that you understand what it's like to be a junior doctor. If you do a befriender role, try and talk to the junior doctors, talk to the F1s. I definitely say focus more on junior doctors than senior doctors, because it's getting through the junior doctor years that can be really tough, and universities are really keen to know that you understand the role of a junior doctor rather than a senior doctor. So what does the F1 do? Does the F1 like their job? If they don't like it, why not? Are they really busy? Are some specialities more busy than others? If so, why? What speciality are you suited to? What are the pressures of the NHS currently on junior doctor morale? You know, these are all things that when you go to your shift, you can be thinking of and then writing down later on for when you go to interview. I think the main thrust of what I'm getting at with this interview is that take any experience that you can get, but just really think about when you get there, what am I here to learn? It's not just to kind of be able to say that I've been here. It's to learn about the job of a doctor, the experience of a patient, working in the MDT, and how I can use all of that to get myself into medical school. I would say if you have got a job that's non-medical, definitely use that as well in your application, because there will be something that's transferable into medicine. So communication skills will always be transferable. How have you ever dealt with a difficult customer? What did you do that went well? What did you do that went wrong? That's something that can definitely be applied to a difficult patient. And don't forget that in A&E and psychiatry, you can, or in all specialities, but mostly in those two, you can often see patients who are very distressed. Have you dealt with anyone in distress? Even if it's, I used to work for a bank, and I used to work with customers who were really unhappy with us all the time, especially if they'd had long waits. And I really learned how to deal with people who are unhappy, and I found that very useful as a junior doctor, just because I'm able to communicate with people very well and I'm able to listen. And that was something that I did use in my applications to talk about those skills. So if you're kind of scratching your head and thinking I don't have much medical experience, I would recommend going and getting some formal medical experience, because otherwise you can't show that you've got commitment or the duties of you don't know what the duties of a doctor are. But there are other things that you can pull from your previous life, if you've had a job, which are things like your ability to deal with difficult customers, or your ability to deal with a difficult colleague. Working in the NHS is about working with lots of different people. Sometimes you will find that your colleagues are quite difficult. How are you going to deal with that and be professional and compassionate and think about patient safety? If you've done that in a previous job, again, log it down. If you're working a full-time job at the moment, again, make it work for you. Don't just you work for it, it works for you. Think about how you're interacting with patients, and not patients, but customers, colleagues, clients, all of that stuff. Anything that you can pull from it, use it. I guess that's really the thrust of everything that I want to say. If anyone's got any questions or comments, please leave them below. Please subscribe if you want more of the same. And you can follow me on Instagram as well. I do tend to chart what I'm doing with medicine and other things in my life. My handle is somewhere in the information bar. And thank you very much.